Are you reassured, Nigel Farage, that these things will now be taken seriously because there has been a complete change, it seems, in the way that these things are dealt with and looked at?
Well, not really. And the problem is it's 1981. We're going back nearly 35 years. A lot of the witnesses are going to be dead. It sounds like there's a lot more to come out. And it sounds like perhaps one of the greatest scandals ever in modern Britain. But are the police really going to get to the bottom of this? I don't know. I started off being a bit sceptical about all the gossip when I first heard it sort of 9 or 10 months ago. But it does appear that something pretty awful happened within the police force. Really,
you regarded it as perhaps just speculation, as about gossip, and now you think there is something solid and firm to be...
It almost seemed too incredible to me to be true. Some of the stories we were hearing about parties, about people being killed, some of the stuff that was circulating around, I thought perhaps this was the wilder shores of the internet that had reached us. But it now does look like something pretty extraordinarily bad has happened. What do you think the government should do in their response? How do you think they should respond to these allegations themselves? Well, I don't think... let's be fair. It isn't the responsibility of the current government of the day,
no,
or indeed the Metropolitan Police Force.
But it is their response, obviously, that counts. And whether...
No, clearly, the public attitude towards all of this, as you say, has hardened. They are going to have to set up some kind of inquiry. It'll cost a lot of money. It'll take a lot of time. Will we get to the bottom of it? My concern is it's just such a long time ago. I'm not saying we shouldn't try, but I somehow doubt we'll ever get the full truth.
Let's leave that there. What do you think about the minimum wage? You're a fan of increasing the minimum wage. How would it affect your plan to remove anyone earning minimum wage from paying tax?
I think we're missing the big picture. Labour brought in the minimum wage, and I understand why they did, but what they couldn't have foreseen at the time, or didn't foresee at the time, was that as we opened up our doors to a mass of unskilled labour coming into Britain from southern and eastern Europe, effectively what's happened is the minimum wage has become the maximum wage. There's nearly 1.4 million workers on this. So we've driven down the cost of labour. Market forces have done that. I don't think putting it up by 20p, frankly, makes any difference.
How much would you put it up by?
Well, what I would do is stop the unrestricted flow of unskilled migrant labour, which would make the market actually automatically start to pay people a bit more.
You don't really agree with this state intervention in a minimum wage at all, do you? You would just leave it to the market. You'd remove
I think the irony,
one thing of it, but
I think
otherwise...
the irony is that we introduced a minimum wage that actually, rather than helping people on low pay, has put a glass ceiling on them. So I think we've got this wrong, and I want to see. I want to deal with the labour market. There is no need for Britain to have this flow of labour.
Would you get rid of the minimum wage?
No.
You wouldn't, right? No. So you would have that state intervention. You're happy for that state intervention, even though you said you'd rather have the market actually dictate people's wages.
Well, what I said was that the market has pushed people on minimum wage down. But we can deal with the market forces and we can stop that massive flow of unskilled labour. That would help every working family in Britain.
Right. Well, if you actually say that it should be down to the market, how would it affect your plan? Because there is a plan, is there, from UKIP to remove anyone earning the minimum wage from paying any tax.
Yes.
Right. So,
yes.
If it goes up, how does that affect your plan? You would still keep increasing the threshold at which people start paying tax?
The minimum wage is the wage that is set by the state. And what we're arguing is that nobody on minimum wage should pay tax. Because actually, all we're doing is taking money from people and then giving it back to them. And I think this would be a very good way of incentivising people on benefit to get to work. But what I want to see is the minimum wage being the exception and not the rule, and you do that by stopping this unrestricted flow.
What do you say, though, to Nigel Farage's point that actually it was the flow of unskilled work and people coming into Britain that actually then kept wages down, if you like, and that's what's been difficult for working people in this country?
Well, I think the truth is, I'm back in Chesterfield. Many people are concerned about the impact of immigration. When I'm in London, I walk around. I think there wouldn't be a single hotel open if it wasn't for migrant labour. And actually, we were facing a pensions crisis a few years ago because rather than having a large number of people working, a small number at pension age, we had the opposite. So I think that the sort of the simplistic solutions that UKIP propose are not backed by business. They're not backed by people who actually understand the way our economy works. They're not backed by people who understand the way that the world works at the moment. So we do need strong controls on our borders. We do need stronger rules in terms of when people are able to claim benefits. But I think that turning our back on Europe in the way that Mr Farage proposes will be catastrophic.
All I was arguing was that big business and big capital actually likes the unrestricted free flow of labour because for them it's cheaper wages.
Right, OK.
Simple as that.
Let's move on. You would abolish inheritance tax altogether, Nigel?
Yes, I would. And actually, it may be a small percentage of the overall country.
It is.
But in London, it is very difficult for anybody doing a reasonable job under the age of 40 to even get on the property ladder.
We are talking about national
and there's
politicians,
a feeling,
aren't we? I mean, what is the percentage for the national?
We are.
As you say,
it's a few
tiny.
percent.
It is.
It's a few percent.
It's about 3%.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
tiny.
even less?
Yeah,
right.
It's tiny.
But that's not
I would
for
get.
everyone,
I
is
would
it?
get rid of inheritance tax. Tax has been paid on that money already, and as I say, particularly in areas like London, this will be the only way many people will ever get the chance to get on the property ladder.
Right. You said, Nigel Farage, in your book, you could do a deal to support the Conservatives on votes such as the budget in the likely event of another hung parliament. Is this the sort of thing you would like to see support?
What I'm interested in is the overall size of the annual budget deficit and how that compounds on our national debt. And the one thing that has not been spoken about, despite the fact most of the budget appears to have been leaked already.
So is it a sort of budget you could support as it stands, as you
And I
say,
doubt we'll hear tomorrow, well, George Osborne will not stand up tomorrow and say, I apologise, I've doubled the national debt in my 5 years as Chancellor. He won't say that. And what I would like to see is, are there actually going to be, for the next 5 years, some credible plans to cut the size of a deficit? Because the one thing, yes, the economy is looking better on many of the indicators, but it's all being fuelled by massive, massive deficit financing.
Yeah, now.
It was fairly comprehensive.
Yes,
wasn't
I thought that was fairly
done.
comprehensive, but there are plenty of holes, as I'm sure you can imagine. Now, you once stated admiration for Margaret Thatcher, who famously said, "You turn if you want to, the lady's not for turning on her economic plans." But even with your admiration of Margaret Thatcher, after her death, you declared that you were the only politician keeping the flame of Thatcherism alive.
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that, but some of the newspapers wrote that.
Right, OK. Well, do you? Do you still feel that you are keeping Thatcherism alive?
Well, do I want to have a country where the state is smaller and people are paying reasonable taxes and we have growth and aspiration in the economy? Yes.
Right. What about flat tax? We've just spoken about taxes. That was in the 2010 manifesto. You spoke an awful lot about it at the time. It's gone.
Well, I didn't speak about it at all. I wasn't party leader at the time. I was just one of 650 candidates, actually. What we're proposing for tax is a radical plan to get the low-paid out of tax, to get rid of inheritance tax. I think they're all very common, common sense, straightforward ideas.
No, it's all about just clarifying what's actually going to be in and part of UKIP policy and what isn't. And when you look back...
Can I just say this
to
you? I mean, I know people that watch this programme are interested in politics, but in general, we've now had a general election campaign that's been going on since the 2nd of January. And what all of you guys in the media try and do, and I understand why, is as if you want the manifestos now to make sure that everybody's completely bored to death by the time May the 7th comes along. What we've tried to do in the last few weeks is to set out the broad principles on which we're going to campaign, on tax, on immigration and everything else. We will release a manifesto in April, and we can then, talk about the minutiae of the sums.
Right.
But discussing the broad principles of policy and the differences between the political parties seems to me to be rather more important.
Right, well, let's have a look at immigration, since, as you say, that is something you have talked about very recently and over the last few years. A couple of weeks ago on the Today programme, you told the programme that you and UKIP would not introduce arbitrary immigration targets, probably on the back of what's happened to the coalition government. But you then said you wanted to get net immigration, I should say, down to a normal level of between 20,000 and 50,000. So what is UKIP's policy going to be?
Well,
is there going to be a target?
No, targets are ludicrous. I've given you a range. That is where we would like to see net migration into Britain. After all, it's about the figure that we had from 1950 until nearly the turn of the century. That would be a return to normality.
Right, but that is a target, isn't it? So you're going to try and get it between 20,000 and 50,000.
Yeah, but I don't want to use terms like caps and ceilings. That is what we're aiming at.
Yes, but people want to be able to hold you to account, and you were able to hold the government to account because they set a cap.
We are not going to be forming the next government. Let's be clear about that. We are not going to win over 300 seats.
But you're going to be scrutinising the government.
I'd love to think we could. But what we are going to do is use whatever influence we have in the next parliament to argue for the kind of policies that give us a radical cut in migration to Britain.
Right, because it was Stephen Wolfe who said there would be a cap, a gross cap, if you like, of 50,000. So this is a net migration cap of between 20 and 50,000 on an annual basis.
Yes, which would be a very big change.
It certainly will be a very big change. But you'll achieve that, obviously, partly by coming out of the EU. But what will you do about non-EU migration, bearing in mind it was that section of the immigration target that actually went up?
Well, I think what we should be doing is treating EU and non-EU migration, frankly, as one and the same thing, because what we've been doing over the last couple of years is discriminating in favour of people from Southern and Eastern Europe, and in many cases against people from the rest of the world. So what we're talking about is a more ethical approach to immigration and to base a policy along along the lines of an Australian point system.
Right, but the last set of figures actually said 47% were non-EU. That was 292,000 people. Would you be happy with that?
Which represents an astonishing failure of government.
Right, so you wouldn't be happy with that figure. But you've just said you want to see more people coming from that part of the...
No, I don't want us to have an open door to unskilled migrant labour from southern and eastern Europe, and in some cases to be closing the door on skilled migrants that might be the right people.
Is the party united on the issue of immigration? Because, I mean, I've spoken to Douglas Carswell on this programme, and he said Enoch Powell was wrong on the subject of immigration. Well, hang on. He said Enoch Powell was wrong on the subject of immigration. He said immigration has not been without its challenges, yet it has been overwhelmingly a story of success. Now, you have said that Enoch Powell, with the main thrust of what he said in that Rivers of Blood speech, was right.
Well, I've said time and again that the speech was one of the most misjudged speeches in British politics, and as a result of it...
But you said the thrust of the arguments were right.
And as a result of it, we couldn't discuss the issue for 30 or 40 years afterwards. The point is this: Douglas Carswell supports an Australian-style point system so that we can choose the quantity and quality of who comes to this country. And this is really important because we're going into an election campaign where I suspect the other parties would rather we didn't discuss this at all, because they know there is nothing we can do about migration from the rest of the EU. And with the Eurozone in the mess that it's in, the implications of that are massive over the next 5 years.
All right, well, let's talk about health, because in January you told the BBC's Nick Robinson that you believe privatising the health service was a debate that we're all going to have to return to. And it was opposition from your own party members that had forced you to temporarily drop a policy, which was one based on social insurance. Is that right?
No, we never had that. What I did say was that when the Labour Party privatised the National Health Service, there was no opposition to it at all. And they privatised vast chunks of it, including the PFI scheme.
Right, hang on, Nigel Farage. I know what the Labour Party... Can I just talk about social insurance?
I have never, ever advocated an American-style health system. What I did say... What I did say a few years ago is we should examine how the French do this. We should examine how the Dutch do this, because they do use more insurance within their system.
Because you think that would be a way to go in the future, that actually a social insurance system...
I lost that argument. You know, we've had that debate within UKIP. I don't dominate everything. You know, we want a national health service that is run properly, that is free at the point of access. We feel we could find more money for it by not being members of the European Union. But you've been persuaded of that, haven't you? Because that wasn't your personal view. You didn't agree with that. Well, you know, grown-ups have debates about
absolutely,
things.
I'm not critical. I just want to know.
And sometimes they can be persuaded by others to change their view.
And is it still your personal view? I know you've agreed to the party line.
My personal view is we ought to run the NHS a damn sight better than we currently do.
Is your personal view still that you would prefer and think it would be better for the NHS to have a system of social insurance to pay for it?
No, because I have seen where we've taken chunks of the National Health Service out of state control, and it frankly hasn't worked.
Right, except, I mean, you have an ambivalent relationship with the NHS. In your book, you praise the institution for its excellent critical care, when, in one way, it did save your life, and then you claim it nearly killed you.
It did,
when the doctors failed to spot your testicular cancer when you were 21. So you say you've been persuaded of a...
this is... I have to say that of all the topics that we discuss in this country, when the NHS gets discussed, all it needs is someone to say, aren't the doctors and nurses wonderful? Everybody claps, and it's the end of the debate.
And in your mind, they're not.
Just because you criticise something doesn't mean you don't love it and value it.
Right. But you do admit it, in your mind, it nearly killed you, and you should take private healthcare. You said if you can afford it.
Well, look at the Mid Staffordshire Hospital. I mean, look at many other cases where there have been failures within the system. We need to be honest about that. We need to be honest about the growth of middle management. And actually, you know, I think more public involvement, voting for health boards, things like that, we get a better national health service. But
with your comments there, it sounds as if you're saying to people, actually, you're at risk from the National Health Service. Without private healthcare, I would probably be dead. If you can afford private healthcare, you should take it.
No, I would be dead, because diagnostics...
But what do you say to all those people who can't afford it?
Let's get a better health service, and let's get one that gives us a better bang for our buck. Why is it, despite this massive increase in spending, that we compare ourselves to France and Germany, and we are behind, whether it's stroke, cancer or heart disease
Should everyone who can afford it go private?
If people... We're only talking about 5, 6, 7, 8% of the population. If people can afford it, should they go private? Yes, and do you know why? That would actually relieve some of the burden on the National Health Service for everybody else.
Let's look at same-sex marriage and civil partnerships. Does UKIP support same-sex marriage and civil partnerships?
We've always supported civil partnerships.
Have you always supported it?
We've always supported civil partnerships. What we did say was that we found it extraordinary that in the middle of this Parliament, without a manifesto commitment, David Cameron chose to make this one of the flagship policies of this Parliament.
Right.
And we were very surprised by that.
Right, because you told at LBC Radio that new legislation could force churches to conduct ceremonies that they and their members were ideologically opposed to. It didn't sound like you were supporting it, that you actually thought they shouldn't be.
No, I said at the time I didn't think the legislation should have been brought forward. I thought civil partnerships actually had worked. I noted that even Stonewall, the leading gay charity in the country, wasn't campaigning for gay marriage, yet despite all of that, the government pushed ahead with it. To date, we've not had a court case at the European Court of Human Rights that has forced those of religious faith to conduct services against their wishes, I am pleased to say. It doesn't mean that legislation, is not coming down the track.
OK. All right, let's have a look at slaughter of animals, just briefly. What is UKIP's policy on religious slaughter of animals? Should they still be allowed to do it in the Jewish and Muslim communities?
Yes, I think they should, and I think that too. I mean, certainly as far as Chiquita's concerned, our agricultural spokesman went to a Chiquita slaughterhouse and was massively impressed with the way in which they operate.
Right, because on the website it actually says animal and veterinary science has long concluded that cutting the throats of animals whilst they are fully conscious can cause significant distress and pain. And UKIP says we see no reason why religious groups should not take into account the concerns of animal welfare when carrying out that slaughter. And you were going to support the animal rights groups in a ban on non-stun slaughter of animals.
I never was. No.
Right.
I never
it is
ever
on your,
was.
Just to let you, it's on your website.
Well, I went and spoke, at a big event organised by the Jewish Chronicle 2 years ago in North London, where I made it clear we had looked into the Chiquita method of slaughter and we were happy with it.
Right. In February this year, it looks like you've U-turned and you're supporting the ban.
I haven't U-turned. This is somebody on the National Executive Committee pushing a campaign for animal welfare, which I fully understand, and overstepping the mark.
Right. So that is not UKIP's policy.
Never has been.
You are not going to be pushing
years.
a ban on this. OK, fine. I mean, when it comes to religion, do you believe in God?
I do, but I'm a pretty lapsed Anglican, it has to be said.
I mean, do you think it's something politicians should talk more about?
No, but I do think what we need to do is to talk about Christian values within our country, and that is a different thing, but very, very important. I mean, we do actually have a constitution in this country that is based on Judeo-Christian principles, and that is quite important.
Right, and what's your view then towards Islam? How does that fit in, those Christian Judeo principles?
Well, what we've done with lots of different faiths over the years, and we had been the most successful country in Europe in terms of integration, is we accept, of course, people have private observance of faith. But overall, if you've got people from different religions and different countries coming to this country, they have got to adhere to the way we live our lives. And that's the particular problem that we've got here. There is a very mercifully small number of people, but there are a small number of people who've come to Britain who have the Muslim faith, who have decided they will campaign to get rid of our constitution and change our entire way of life. People like you wouldn't be presenting television programmes if this narrow band of extremists
God forbid.
got their way.
Let's leave it there for a short break. Now, but let's talk about Thanet South. You're about 11 points ahead in the polls in the seat you're standing for. You say it'll be curtains if you don't win. Is that because you're quietly confident of winning?
No, I wrote that.
I know.
A long time before an opinion poll. In fact, when I wrote that, the opinion poll said I was behind. I said it because it's a matter of fact.
But are you quietly confident now?
We'll see. I'm travelling optimistically. I think I probably will win the seat, but there's going to be no complacency from me at all.
Right. What about, though, this idea that if you don't, let's imagine that's it. Is that really going to be the case?
Of course.
Right.
Look, I believe in life, if you succeed, you should get rewarded, and if you fail, you should get the sack. It's quite simple.
What do you think would happen to the party? Because the party's you, isn't it, really?
Well, it's a lot more than me, and that's what I've written about. I've just published Purple Revolution. I've talked about the growth of UKIP, and I've said in there that the real change, before we were a party that did well in European elections and then fell away in general elections, the big change since 2012 is there's now a team of professional people, maybe small, but a team of professional people running the party. If I fall under a bus tomorrow, UKIP is still going to be out there with a big level of support. Did
you publish the book, though, on a high? Do you think at the sort of at the apex, if you like, of UKIP, do you worry it's all going to be downhill?
Oh, I've seen so many peaks. I mean, I saw the peak of the elections of 2013 for the English county councils. I saw the European elections, and all the commentary on programmes like this said, well, of course, they'll never win a seat in Westminster. I saw Douglas Carswell win Clacton to be told it wouldn't happen in Rochester, and it did. So, no. I mean, UKIP... The UKIP vote is a very solid vote.
But you've got a very strong grip on the party, haven't you? I mean, you describe yourself as a Marmite politician. I don't know if you think that's a good thing to be if you're winning a seat and continue as leader of the party? Do you not think that being that divisive will actually hold you back?
Well, everybody else wants to be bland, wishy-washy and like each other. I'm sorry, what you see is what you get. If people like it, that's great, and if they don't, well, tough.
Well, in terms of the grip of the party, what do you say about the MEP David Coburn and the comments that he has reportedly made during a conversation about his appearance on the BBC's big immigration debate? He claimed that Humza Yousaf, who's the Scottish Government's Minister for Europe and International Development, who'd been due to appear on the show, saying Humza Yousaf, or as I call him, Abu Hamza, didn't seem to turn up. Now, as you know, Humza Yousaf has asked for him to be kicked out. What do you say?
I haven't spoken to David Coburn about it, but
are those comments acceptable?
I can only guess. He's either saying he's a terrorist or he's telling a joke in poor taste. I suspect it's the latter.
Right.
He's telling a joke in poor taste.
So he won't be going anywhere. Right. Thank you.
Well, people do make mistakes, and I don't think David Coburn should have done that. But am I going to get terribly exercised over it? No.
One incident, there was no evidence of radicalisation or any plot to impose it.
I mean, I very much hope this is true. I hope this is not another attempt to brush something under the carpet because it's too awkward. I'd be very interested to hear what Michael Gove has to say about this, because when he was Education Secretary, it appeared to me that he took these claims pretty seriously.
Right, but it sounds like they were very slow to react. So there was a massive gap.
I hope this is right.
Right. Hope because you doubt it and because you think there is and was evidence there of extremism.
I hope because I'm sceptical, yes.
Right, why? Why are you sceptical?
Well, we have perhaps up to 1,000 people from this country, British passport holders out in Syria as we speak. There is a problem. Somewhere people are being radicalised. We know prisons are a very major source of radicalisation, and clearly there is worry about schools.
What, and you think that's happening in the schools? You think that's where they're being trained and groomed?
Well, I know prisons are a serious problem.
Well, what about these schools?
We know in certain mosques where there are very extreme preachers, and when I heard all of this last year and I saw Michael Gove, as it appeared to me, trying to take tough action, I suspected there might be a problem. I will take this report on face value. I hope it's right.
You don't sound like you believe it.
I'm sceptical.
But why are you sceptical? I mean, if no evidence was found, you've used very broad generalities to say that because we've got a number of youths going out to Syria, going through Turkey, that there must be a plot somehow to radicalise people.
We have a very large number of people, a very worrying number of people. I'm sure all of us from across the political divide would agree with that. Clearly, schools are one of the potential problems. And you said yourself, a very narrow interpretation of what the curriculum could be. There is clearly a problem of some kind. It's just, in this report, it says it's not extremism.
Have you